Hello everyone, I'm Paul and welcome to Gelling Outdoors. Today is Chainsaw Inspection Day. Thought I'd share with you how I maintain my chainsaws for longevity and safe operation. So let's get started. After I've cleaned up all the saw and removed all the external components and the bar and the chain, what I do is I take each component and I examine it for any cracks or breaks or any defects. And that goes for all the coverings that I have for each component. And in addition to that, I take the saw and I look it over, make sure that there's no cracks or any defects anywhere on the saw that may cause some kind of an issue down the road. The next thing that I do is I examine my chain. On the chain, what I normally do is I look here using my magnifying glass with a light. As you can see here, it allows me to see the chain at much better for what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for on the chain are a few things. I'm looking at these rivets here for the tie straps. I'm making sure that none of the tie straps or the rivets on them are popped out or cracked or missing. Also, I'm looking at down below the drive links. I'm making sure that they're not worn out or that there's any crack or damage to it. On the top of the chain, I'm looking at the teeth or the cutters, and I want to make sure that the cutters are fairly consistent in length and that there's no severe damage on any of them. So that's basically it for the chain. The next thing that I look at is the bar. And at the bar, what I'm looking for is the sprocket. I'm making sure that the end sprocket is rotating smoothly, that it hasn't been pinched, and that it doesn't turn properly. I'm looking for any damage. The bar itself, I'm feeling for any burrs on the bar on both sides to make sure that it's nice and smooth. I'm looking for at the color of my bar as well to make sure that I'm not tensioning my chain too loose or too tight, so that I'm not burning the bar or damaging the bar as it chain is spinning around. The other things that I look at is here in the bar groove. I'm looking to see that the bar groove is not widened. And the reason why I say that is if I have the chain on here and I want to know or make sure that if there's a lot of play in here, this chain, the bar is brand new, so there's no play, I can't really wobble it. But if you can get a lot of wiggle room in here, your bar has been stretching or widened here, and that will cause it to unevenly wear your bar or even have the chain pop off. Also, I do check, I do have calipers. I do use a digital caliper, and with the digital caliper, I do check the height of the groove, because what I want to do, actually I use this part of it here on the caliper. You can see here there's a little, like this. I check it this way, ouch, and I check the depth of the groove. The depth of the groove will wear down as well, and it causes issues for your bar and chain again. So it's just to keep things running smooth and safely. Oh, the one last thing too is and it's a little harder to do this, and that is especially on a short bar. A longer bar is a little easier. I'm trying to make sure that my bar is straight, that it's not bent or crooked. The next thing that I inspect is the sprockets on the chainsaw. On this one, it has a rim sprocket, as you can see here, and it's a floating system. What I'm looking for is that there's no cracks in the sprocket and that how much wear there is in here. Your drive link sits in the slots, so you want to make sure that your slots are not all worn down. This is, as I mentioned, a rim sprocket. The other type of sprocket that you may have that's slightly different, and this one here, I'll just take this off. This one's a spur sprocket. There's a little E-clip you got to remove, a washer usually, and then the drum and the sprocket are basically one piece. So the same thing, you want to make sure that where the chain is sitting, the drive links sit, that there's not excessive wear here. Also, you want to check the drum out to make sure the drum is not cracked. You can see here, this drum here has got a little bit of nicks and stuff. That's not too bad. And also that there's not a big ton of debris or rust going on in here. Under the clutch drum is the clutch itself. Now, in some cases, you may have your clutch drum sitting this way and your clutch is sitting inside, facing towards you. This one here, it's inside, as you can see here. What I'm looking for here is two things. One is I'm making sure that the springs look healthy, and also that the shoes on the clutch are not cracked or damaged, or they're not pushing out, or there's no issues inside here. As you can see, this metal band around the clutch is the safety brake. I examine the safety brake. I make sure that it's working. And on this saw, there's no brake handle right now. I'll show you on the other saw. So you can see here, it's the small band on there. When I push, I want to make sure that it's tightening properly. I can't move that. When I release the brake, that I can quite easily spin it. The other thing too is I want to make sure that this is spinning nice and smooth. Now, the one thing is, I'll show you on this other saw, is that the way you can tell if your clutch or your sprocket's having any issues, if you unlock this one, if you can move your chain and it's nice and smooth like this is, whether I pull it back and forth, it's nice and smooth. Now, if it feels bumpy or it's catching in here, usually there's an issue with your sprocket and it's time to change it. The next thing is underneath the, here on this saw, I'll show you, underneath the drum here as it comes off, there's the needle bearing or roller bearing. You want to make sure that it's well lubricated and also that there's no damage here as well. If this goes, it could really impact your drive shaft on the saw, and if that happens, you're going to really mess up the internal aspects of your chainsaw. When you put this clutch drum back on, you can see there's a little notch right here. Hopefully you can see that. There's a little notch. That notch has to line up with what's called a worm gear. In here, you can't quite see, I don't think you can quite see it, but right there, there's a little piece of metal sticking out. Basically, that's my worm gear in there. What you want to do is line that groove up, and you can see there's a mark there, and it will drop in, and it'll drop in, and it'll be connected to the worm gear. Now, the worm gear is basically what is used with your oiler to get the oiler to pump oil to your bar. So the next thing that I want to look at is my spark plug. I'll just pull it out here. And with regards to the spark plug, I'm looking for a few things. I'm checking to make sure that there's no cracks here. And in addition to that, I'm looking at the color and the wear on the electrode. So with regards to the color, I want to make sure there's also no deposits of carbon, or I don't want to see a bunch of oil gucky stuff on here or anything like that. The best thing that you can do with the spark plug is take it out, look at it, and also go online and compare it to a chart where they show you all the different extremities of what a good spark plug looks like, a foul spark plug, and so on and so forth. Also, what I do with the spark plug is I check the gap to make sure that it's gapped appropriately. So that's the spark plug. The next thing that I check out is the flywheel. Here's your flywheel, and what I'm looking for here on the flywheel again is just mostly for any damage, anything that could possibly be bent or cracked. Also, the amount of dirt that's in there. You want to keep this clean, because what happens is as this spins, as you can see, the fins are blowing or pulling air up into the top of the saw. So you want to make sure this is as clean as possible. Basically, dirt and heat are your saw's enemies, so you want to keep this as clean as you can. And you want to make sure that the springs or anything else looks appropriate. There's no breaks or missing parts in here. So the next thing I want to talk about is the cylinder head and the fins. You want to make sure that they're all clean. You can't clean it up unless you remove the covers. So make sure all the cylinder heads are cleaned up. And in addition to that, make sure, well, it's pretty hard to tell on this one here, but you're going to check to see if there's any damage or cracking going on. You'll have to look fairly close. You can see on this side here, if I put a light, let me just grab a light, you can see inside. You can see a little bit better, but anyways, look at your head to make sure that there's no damage or any kind of issues in there. The next thing that I check out are the fuel lines. Back here, when I'm checking out the fuel lines, if I can find them, there's one right here. Take the air filter off. Okay, I've got the fuel lines. What I'm checking for my fuel lines to make sure that there's no cracks, and then also that the fuel lines are not really hard. They should be soft. They shouldn't be all hardened up. If they're starting to harden up, change that fuel line, because you're going to get a crack in the fuel line fairly soon in that case. The next thing I check out are the filters. I make sure that my filters are still looking functional, that there's no issues with them, like in this case that there's no damage to it or anything like that. So the next thing that I inspect are the filters for the oil and for the gas. And as you can see here, I've already pulled one out. It's this one here is a little difficult to get out, so I did it off camera. What I'm looking for is to make sure that my fuel filter is still filling. It shouldn't be too hard. It shouldn't be all clogged up. So I'm making sure that it's in good condition. The next thing that I do, and I'm not going to take everything apart to talk about this because it'll take too long. It'll lengthen the video up too much. But that is two things. One, I'll take off my exhaust, and on the other side here, I'll pull out the carburetor. And the reason why I'm pulling out the exhaust and the carburetor is because I want to look at the piston and the cylinder inside there. Basically, I can watch look at the piston by pulling the pull cord. Drop the clutch. I pull the cord, the rip cord, and what I'm looking for is that there's any scoring on the cylinder from the exhaust side and also from the intake side. And in addition to that, I can see my rings, and I want to make sure my rings are a healthy color. You can go online and get some information about that. The next thing I want to do is on the chainsaw, I'm going to go through and make sure that all the anti-vibration mounts, I'll show you, I'm just going to grab a screwdriver here. I want to make sure all these anti-vibration mounts, you can see here on the steels, there's a little cap here that usually you can pull off. But these caps do fall off and the rubber mounts do pop out. I want to make sure that the rubber mounts are incorrect, and I'll show you here on the Echo saw. Maybe you can see here. There's a little nub here. I want to make sure that that nub is there. And you can see here it's got the rubber mounts. Now some chainsaws have coils or springs. I'll show you that. For the anti-vibration, you can see here on this one, underneath, there's a spring. I want to make sure that the springs are still in good shape, that they haven't come off, and there's no cracks or breaks. And again, you can see under here, there's another one. Hopefully you can see that it's not too dark. So there's a spring in there. Anyways, you can check all the different mounts, or not the mounts, but the anti-vibration rubbers and springs to make sure that they're all intact, and that way your saw is going to feel nice and comfortable in your hands, and you're not going to get excessive vibration. Those things do crack, they do break, so it's a good idea to keep that in mind as well. The next thing that I do is that I go around, and you can see here, we've got the little bolt here, here. We've got bolts here, and what I'm saying is basically I go around the saw and I make sure two things. One, all the bolts are tight and that there's nothing missing. If there's something missing, I'll just replace it, and if it's loose, obviously just tighten it up a bit. The next thing that I do is I check the ripcord, and where's that piece here? I want to make sure that the wear and tear here on the back of it is that it's still in good shape. Also, I want to make sure that it's operating smoothly. And thirdly, I want to make sure that there's no fraying going on. As you can see here on this cord that I replaced, it started to fray because I don't want to be out in the field and pull my saw and that breaks off. It's a lot easier to change it when it's needs to be done rather than wait until it breaks on you. It would be a big disappointment. So the next thing that I inspect is the exhaust spark arrestor. And on this one here, I can show you, I've taken it off already to save some time. You can see here, this one was sitting like this. So I'll just kind of get it in there. Basically all it is just a screen. And this screen here will fill up with carbon. And you can see this one's nice shape, it's nice and clean. If it fills up with carbon, what I do is I take a propane torch, I burn all the carbon off, and clean it with a little wire brush or soft brush. It's a good idea to keep this clean. If you don't keep it clean, your saw will start to bog down on you once it all plugs up. So on this chainsaw here, it's a slightly different location, but in behind here, just take off these two bolts, and in behind there is going to be the screen. So every saw could be a little slightly different where the spark arrests are sitting, but it's an important thing to keep that clean. The next thing that's very much an important thing is that the little roller down here, also called a chain catch. Now they're not all rollers. I'll show you the other style as well. But this chain catch, basically, they do break and they do fall off. So you want to make sure that this is here, because if your chain's going to come off, this is what's going to save you from it whipping back at you. So that's one style. I've got the roller style. And on this saw over here, you can see down at the bottom, it's basically a piece of aluminum, and it's there to, again, catch the chain if it comes off. So that's basically my inspection. There are some things that I didn't do there or didn't mention to you. Those things that I cover in either my maintenance or my testing on the saws. So if you maintain your saw regularly, you're not going to have any issues. You're going to be much safer. I'd like to note a couple things. This saw here is 20 years old, and I've used it every year. And when I say I've used it a lot. And it just finally broke down. So longevity of a non-pro, this is not a pro saw, this is a consumer saw. So if you look after it, they do last for quite a long time. I also have a pro saw, don't have it here with me, it's in my chainsaw location. Anyways, it's 33 years old and I use that thing daily. So I got one little tip for you guys today, and that is whenever you buy a new saw or any kind of equipment, what you do is you take it all apart like I did here, look around, get familiar with it, take pictures of every angle and every piece that you have. That makes good for referencing for whenever you're going to do anything like what I did here today, or if you have to do any kind of maintenance. Other than that, I'd like to mention that whenever I do my inspections, it all depends how much I'm using my saw. If I'm using my saw daily, the inspection will come sooner. If I'm using my saw less than daily, obviously it will come a little bit later. Also, what influences when I'm going to do it is what I'm doing with my saw, whether I'm cutting stumps, whether I'm logging, whether I'm clearing trails, whatever it is. So keep that in mind. Basically just make up a schedule on your own, but don't leave it too long. That's the important thing. So other than that, guys, that's basically it for today. And hopefully there was something here that helped you out. And also, if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button down below. It will help me out to make more videos like this. And for those of you that have subscribed already, I really appreciate you watching. So anyways, guys, until next time, we'll see you on Gelatin Outdoors.